So the recording has started and we're live online. So we are in session. We're having a little bit of difficulty with Ms. Blackburn's connection. We should have that on in just a few minutes. And we're going to go ahead and begin the meeting. So Mr. Phillips, I'm going to put the flag on the screen and I'd like for you to unmute your mic and you may get the meeting started, call us to order, and have the pledge and get the agenda approved and all those sort of things. So Mr. Phillips, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'd like to call the Shelby County Board of Education for March the 26th, 2000. First item is pledge allegiance to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of
America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Klein,
Second.
second by Mrs. Jackson. Any questions? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Brings us down to B, recognitions and presentations. Mr. Neidhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. We do not have any recognitions or presentations tonight. We are ready to move on to item D. And these are the discussion items. And the first item there is the superintendent's report, if you are ready to move on to that.
Go ahead, sir. Okay. Hit not the button. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead
Okay.
and mute if you would like. And we're going to take a look at the superintendent's report. I have it on the screen so you all can see my notes. And first of all, you are all aware that we've had a crazy set of events since the last time we had a meeting as a board. And a lot of water has gone under the bridge. And I've tried to keep you updated along with updating the community and our staff and our parents and our students about each step of the way. So you're probably tired of watching my videos, but thank you for your support during this time. I really appreciate you as a board during this time. Commissioner Brown has been having webinars with superintendents every few days. His most recent webinar was yesterday, and there are day before yesterday, and then I had a meeting with him yesterday with OVEC superintendents. He reiterated these three high points in both of those conversations. He's stating these as the focus areas for public education statewide. Number one is educate. Districts are to focus on providing the highest quality instruction possible through the NTI model. I want you to know that in the meetings with him, there are a lot of what if questions being posed. And he shared with superintendents that they have created a task force, this task force of educators, many of them employed at the Department of Ed, and many of them educators from around the state, superintendents and chief academic officers and so forth. And I wanted to share with you the big questions they're talking about. I anticipate we'll get another update from the commissioner tomorrow about some of these pieces. Don't know how many of the questions they'll have answered by tomorrow, but as they're answered, certainly we'll share them with our community. But these are similar questions that are coming from our community. So this possibility that if we have NTI for the remainder of the year, is it possible from the practical and instructional side, can we even do it? And that's a question that he's asking for feedback on. So, and then of course, many districts have not done NTI before, and they're learning how to do this and calling it alternative instruction, and it certainly is an alternative way to instruct and to learn. And so they're asking now, is there an alternative to the alternative? A way to learn different, a way to learn that is different from our current NTI delivery model. And there's grappling with that question as a task force. And then there's a question of how will KDE advise us on graduation related factors. One of those that's being talked about a lot is Keys scholarship distribution, but there are other factors, GPA factors for college entrance and scholarships that's being talked about. It's just a long list of things he says he's hearing from communities, and many of them are being said in our community as well. I want you to know there's a task force working on those answers. I think you are aware that 30 additional NTI days have already been approved to start March 16th. That's retroactive to March 16th, running through as late as May 1 if necessary. So those are in addition to the 10 days we have approved already with our NTI contract with the state. So the other thing that he talked about was some of the questions that have been answered, and they're going to be reiterated by the task force. We'll hear those again. And here is an example of that. If we need to bring teachers in to prepare items for NTI or to deliver packets to people, those sort of things, is that allowable? And the answer to that is yes, that's allowable. And as you know, we're already doing that. The next important thing that the commissioner is highlighting is feeding. He's asking that districts do all the feeding that they can do. And of course, some of the superintendents respond by saying, well, there's a gap between what it's costing us to do that and what the federal government is going to reimburse based on the current reimbursement model. And we're in that space. So I want you all to know that we're significantly short every day when we do the feeding we're doing. We believe it's the right thing to do, and we're certainly going to continue. But at the same time, so if people ask you, is this fully reimbursed by the federal government? The answer to that right now is no, it is not fully reimbursed. At the same time, you've probably heard on some of the press releases and press conferences coming out of DC that Congress and the president have both expressed a commitment to waive the necessary regulations to provide additional reimbursement. So we're hoping it will be dollar for dollar and we'll be made whole. The jury's still out on that, so to speak. The third item under feeding is the waiver to feed over spring break. There is a waiver, and that will be reimbursed. That waiver has been granted. So we are working our way through that process. Obviously, we're doing that on good faith, but we're trying to follow all the guidelines. And when we talk about that in a few minutes, one of the things just to understand the magnitude of that is that we've purchased 1,600 gallons of milk, and we're going to use refrigerated trucks loaned by entities in the community as part of our delivery on Monday. So that's going to be quite a caravan with our buses and the refrigerated trucks carrying that milk. We're looking forward to doing that, but we have a lot of staff really working hard all day today and all day tomorrow. We're going to share more about that with you in a bit. The third thing the commissioner talked about is pay. He's reminding us that we need to make sure that every employee fulfills their contract and no one loses pay. And of course, as you know, I'll remind you again, we have quite a few employees who are in the what we would call on-call status. So they're available to us. They're not able to do all of their work at home. As you know, a lot of our hourly employees don't have jobs that can fully be done at home. So those folks are on call. They're coming in at a moment's notice, and we're happy we're able to have them on call and happy that they're getting paid. And so if folks ask you how that's being done, you can inform folks that we have folks that are on call. Some of those folks who are on call are involved in training. And if you take a look down at item number 2 under that, the commissioner is encouraging districts to think outside the box and think of trainings that you may have always wanted to do but couldn't do for your staff. And if you can design ways for that to happen at home. So we're working on some additional training opportunities that we're going to provide after spring break. I want to take you back to sub-bullet 2 under pay, item 1, sub-bullet 2. The General Assembly will have to approve a change in transportation funding and SEEK funding. KDE has already asked for that. So when we talk about holding the district harmless, in order to hold the district harmless, obviously we have to have our transportation funding. And so what we anticipate is going to happen is both of those pieces, SEEK and transportation, all of the flex focus funds are what you hear us call sometimes the grant funds, preschool and those sort of funds. We anticipate all that will be based on last year's model. And so the average daily attendance number for last year will be applied to this year's number of students. And that's the best methodology we know of right now for them to make districts whole. So there are some folks who are saying they're insisting they get that in writing from the commissioner and from the governor. And at this point, we don't have that in writing, but all we're hearing from the governor and the commissioner assure us that they're going to act in good faith and do everything they can to make good on those promises. I'm going to slide on down to what Commissioner Brown had to say with regard to the opening of schools. And he wanted us to be reminded that this April 20 date for reopening schools is a soft date. And by that, he means that that's our target date. Our goal is to be back in school by the 20th. It's hard to know what's going to happen as we move forward. And he wants us to understand that that's a soft date. So we shouldn't be promising things like this is when prom is going to happen, or this is when this other particular athletic event is going to happen. Right now, it's a soft date. As we get closer to that date, they'll determine whether that's a firm date or not. And as soon as we have the go-ahead for a firm date, we'll start cranking up the engines, do everything possible, and make up for lost time. He's also assured us that there is no magic in the May 1 date, which is the next target date being discussed. It's a point in time that they have identified because it's the first day of the month. So the thought is that that's a couple weeks beyond the April 20 date, and we'll see how that plays out. Superintendents on those calls are reminding the commissioner that they do not believe they can use NTI to get to the 1,062 hours currently required for a complete year of schooling. So I anticipate you're going to hear something about an adjustment in that 1,062 hours of seat time requirement that you're used to hearing about, which is the equivalent of 170 days of instruction or up to 175. And we're at 175 right now. From the legislature, what we're hearing is primarily about the state budget. The big question on the table is, what is the revenue projection? What we're hearing is that each day the pandemic continues, they're ratcheting back the revenue projections. What we understand this week is there's pretty much agreement in the Senate and the House that they've backed off revenue projections. They're using the same revenue projections. So they backed that off by $500 million. And that probably tomorrow we should hear that they backed that off by $750 million. And the good news is that the legislature and the governor they're having positive talks. They're working together on this. But that's their big hangup right now, trying to determine a revenue number that they can agree on to build from. The teacher retirement system is being talked about quite a bit, and that's because all of the educator groups were in opposition to some of the changes the Senate proposed. And those are tied to one big factor, that the Senate would retract funding set aside for TRS if we as a state fail to enact a new retirement system by August 2020. And a lot of folks are pushing back and saying there are just so many things up in the air that to hinge funding the retirement system based on whether or not we have an agreement by August is unreasonable at this point. And so that's the position we've taken. The House has come out on that and said they're resolute in opposition to TRS changes. So we want you to know that that probably is not going to be a go. And we know that a lot of people are kind of upset about that. And if you look on down to the next step, I want to get back to in a minute, with our budget strategy, our role in interacting with our legislators. What we will likely see is deferment of several desired items until the second year of the biennium. That is understandable in this sort of situation, and that is the way the legislature can say, yes, we know these things are important. We think we're going to lose a lot of revenue because of the coronavirus, and what we'd like to do is hold off on some of those things till the second biennium. A good example will be the SEEK funding required for pay raises. Another example is full funding of the pensions. Another one that's been talked about is increasing funding to transportation. So all of those things may be flat in the first year of the biennium and then be picked back up in the second year. One of the things we're hearing from legislators this week, I've heard it in person from one of our legislators, is that they're getting some feedback from educators that it sounds ugly or angry. And what we need to do is keep telling people in the education circles that strategy doesn't really help a lot. Just yelling at people doesn't get us very far. And so we want to be clear on the things that we're concerned about, so they understand our concerns, but do that in a respectful and collegial way. And so I assured our legislators that I'm going to remind you all of that. And if you want to see where that advice is, you can look no further than KSBA. The advice coming from Eric Kennedy, 2 board members, outlines how to do those respectful things. I'm going to switch over and show you some pictures of NTI as I brag on our staff and on so many people that are involved. So I'm going to let you look at some slides here. Oh, that's not where I wanted to be. That's where I wanted to be. So I just want to start off by saying we have great people involved in the work. Teachers, students, food service, bus drivers, custodians, great librarians, great instructional assistants, great community, great people. And that's really obvious. You can see this is something that's going on with making sure we're putting extra books out for our kids. You can see what's happening in the lower left-hand corner, Miss Black doing a read aloud online with her kids from her driveway. And we had teachers parading through neighborhoods yesterday and trying to practice modeling social distancing, but letting our kids know they care about them. Of course, you know, we've been delivering meals, and we have our transportation staff and our food service staff involved in that. And you can see a picture of kind of how it looks when we're loading up and gearing up for a day of food delivery. And you can see at the photo on the right there, this is a site where Painted Stone delivers, and we're really working hard on creating that social distancing we need. And so they're using their bus line sandwich boards to help kids line up in different lines and families line up so that we stay distanced away from each other.
We can't see.
Yeah. Are
Dr.
you able to
Huff,
see
you
the
could
screen?
maybe share that screen one more time.
Well, okay. you should be able to, let me do it again. Can you see it now? Thank you. Stop me sooner next time. All right, give me some feedback. You good now?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, these are great pictures. I'm gonna start at the beginning. All right. So this is delivering our books in a neighborhood. That's one of our teachers, our librarians there. Miss Black on the lower left-hand side. This is your painted stone teachers on the right-hand side heading out on a parade to wave at their kids from their cars. And bus drivers and food service folks. More of our bus drivers and food service folks. This is more food service folks, and there's your painted stone delivery. I think this is about where we were when you caught me to say, well, I didn't succeed in sharing the screen. Here's Shelby County High folks prepping meals. This is when we added an additional site after the first few days. This is a site we added. And we have some parents. We have a parent who is an author, and he is online reading every day. And an instructional assistant who reads and meets with students online. A lot of our teachers, just the various things they're doing online. And you can see at the bottom right-hand corner, if you are on Twitter, you might have seen this picture of Miss Ackland when she was, she had some music going and she was dancing as she was waiting for the kids. That one made the governor's webcast or his press conference, pretty neat. Here's some of our kids in action. And I wanted to make sure you were aware that we have this fantastic school board that's supporting this work. We certainly couldn't be doing these things without you all. And these two gentlemen are really giving us some great leadership, and we appreciate the work that they're doing to support us. And here's a sense of how feeding went. These are the number of meals up through yesterday. Today, we ticked up a little bit again. So you can see that we're providing a lot of meals to our kids. And this is from last weekend as we were gearing up to deliver backpacks for last weekend, providing meals to folks. And this is gearing up for next week. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. This is the note that's going in the meals that we deliver tomorrow, today and tomorrow, so that they know what's coming for next week. So we're sharing this with parents and guardians today and tomorrow. And this was the packing going on today, getting ready for next week. Next week, we are going to take on we are working on it today and tomorrow, taking on a massive task to deliver meals for these 1,600 plus kids all at one time for the full week. So Monday's task will be to run the same routes and be open at the same schools to provide a week's worth of meals. And we're going to share photos of that as we move into the weekend. You're going to see some great photos of that as the next couple of days unfold.
Dr. Nahas, do you need
Yes.
any of the board members to help with that daunting task?
We will let you know if we do. We're trying to be very careful with who's involved and limit the involvement as much as possible. And the big reason we're trying to do that is because we don't want to run the same risk some other districts have of being shut down because they had people involved who were close to folks who had been in contact. Okay. So we're just trying to be really careful, but we do appreciate that. And I have mentioned that several times throughout the week, that if the opportunity avails itself for you to be involved, that you want to. Going back to the superintendent's report, also wanted to add to you that we're surveying parents today and tomorrow for their analysis of the first 2 weeks. That analysis will tell us a lot. So I want you to be aware of that. That will affect our adjustments for after spring break. Let's talk about spring break food a little bit. I just want you to take a look at that and know that we anticipate we'll deliver all of this on Monday. But if for some reason we don't, we will have a strategy for folks we missed to be able to pick up things on Tuesday. But our goal is to do all of this delivery on Monday. Our community partners, we have 2 partners. I think there may even be others come online. But one of the partners that I'm really excited to honor is Purnell's. They're going to provide refrigerated trucks for our milk delivery. So you can imagine, Mr. Phillips knows how much space 1,600 gallons of milk will take up in trucks. That is a lot of milk. And so each child will get a gallon for the week. And Purnell's has graciously agreed to be our partner in those providing those refrigerated trucks to take that around the community. So we're thankful for that. Kroger's providing all the bags, and this is just, as you can imagine, hundreds of bags that are required for us to package these items. And remind you that if folks ask you when this is going to happen, this is going to be delivered by bus on Monday at our usual delivery times and sites. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about what's coming up after spring break. Non-traditional instruction will continue or resume after spring break, but we want it to be exciting and fresh. We don't want it to be just like what we've been doing the first 2 weeks. And remember, we're getting feedback from parents. And I want to just touch on our framework of thinking around this. Our teachers are designing some really exciting units of instruction, and they're doing this with the learning sciences in mind. I just want to touch on what that is. It's the scientific study of the learning process, and that reminds us that we need to have an equal emphasis on cognition, emotion, and motivation when we design learning activities. And you think about the things you've learned to do most successfully in life, they happen when it's not just something your brain's capable of, but it's something you emotionally want to do, and it's something you're highly motivated to do. That motivation, sometimes with schooling, has been the motivation, in my case, that my daddy told me I was going to hear from him when I got home if I didn't do the work. And certainly that's one reason, a one-way motivation can be provided. But we don't want to think in terms of punitive motivation. We want to think in terms of intrinsic motivation, like learning to drive a car. So I wanted to learn to drive a car so I could take myself places and not be dependent on my brother and my mom and dad. It's that sort of thing. We want to design learning activities that are an equal balance of cognition, emotion, and motivation. Some of what we've been doing is a little heavier on the cognition side and a little light on the emotion and motivation side. So we're working to bring more balance to that, and I think that'll result in more excitement about the work when we come back from spring break. We're not going to tell you all the secrets. We want to build some excitement around that. A lot of appreciation to our teachers who've been working on that in the last couple of days, and especially to Miss Dougal for her leadership and her team. It's just really good work that they're doing. Another thing Miss Dougal wanted to remind me of, to tell you all that you're going to see a shift to a focus on quality of work, not on quantity of work. And that's going to be really important to us. that we learn deeply and we have really robust artifacts that really prove mastery. Another thing you're going to see is more cross-curricular learning experiences. So we won't be working on something for math in isolation, something for writing in isolation, something for science in isolation, but we're going to be more cross-curricular. And then we want to help our learners master deep, enduring standards and the profile of a graduate competency. So you're going to hear talk about those two things, the enduring standards and the profile of a graduate competencies. We'll leave it at that for now, but that's what you're going to hear more about as we gear up for the NTI experience after spring break. That's a lot. There's a lot more I could have added. There's a lot I didn't include, but that's already a long report, but there's just a lot to tell you. If you have questions for me, I'll take them now.
Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Nyhoff?
I'm good. Thank you for the report.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
I'm good.
Okay, let's go down to staff reports. Does anybody do we have anybody for staff reports tonight?
Mr. Phillips, we do not have staff reports, so we are ready to move on to board discussion.
Okay, I don't know who's on the right and who's on the left, but I'll start out with Mrs. Jackson. Do you have anything with board discussion?
The only thing I did was help my neighbor with her daycare on one day of feeding. And I was informed by my superintendent that I was in that special group. So they delivered food the rest of the days. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mrs. Friels? She hadn't hit her button yet.
You're on mute, Ms. Frills.
I didn't do that, Joanna.
Okay, now can you hear me? I forgot
Yes,
to
we can hear you.
You can hear me now, right? I think our Shelby County Public Schools, I think they're doing a great job of getting the NTI going. I've heard a lot of positive things by phone. Cindy, you've done a good job posting things on Facebook to keep people, and there's a lot of positive things that are being said there. And just thank everybody. Thanks the teachers and the administrators and everybody for what you're doing for our children here in Shelby County. That's it. And I will mute you now, right?
Okay. Ms. Blackburn, do you have anything you want to tell us?
No, just thanking everybody for their hard work, and thank Dr. Nyhoff for helping us get on, and the IT guys for helping me with my computer and all that good jazz. Everybody just working together. Nope, I'm good. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Klein?
Mr. Phillips, I did want to just make a few public comments. One, I wanted to let folks know that I really appreciate the staff for their efforts in support of our kids. I appreciate our faculty for the reaching out and being consistently focused on staying in contact with our students. As a parent, I know firsthand that teachers, advisories are consistently reaching out. Coaches are reaching out, not in terms of sports, but just making sure that the kids are okay and that they have what they need. And so I just wanted to say a high level of appreciation there. I've had opportunity to walk down with my kids to the food delivery here in Simpsonville, and the happy smiling faces, I know they're working their tails off, but when it comes to greeting the kids, you wouldn't know the difference. They're doing a great job of providing and being supportive. based on Dr. Knopf's comments there about the what all it takes, that well-rounded, the emotional and so forth, the support that we're getting is phenomenal. I also know that while Dr. Nyhoff is fully supported by a great staff, central office staff and others, I do want to specifically say a thank you to Dr. Nyhoff. He's doing a tremendous job informing us, keeping us as a board, keeping us informed. I feel like the messaging that we're getting out on Twitter and Facebook is keeping the public informed. I really appreciate the fact that we're engaged with the state's commissioner and really getting good feedback from KSBA and from the commissioner and knowing what's going on. It's unprecedented times, and I feel like Dr. Knopf is hitting it right in stride, and I just wanted to say thank you. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Would Cameron and Hank have anything to say? You're on the front line with us.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you so much to Dr. Nyhoff for all of his hard work during these pressing times. In all my years of living, and it's not been long, but I've never seen this much unity in a community and how much people have come together from all over the county and state. It's been really eye-opening. These are different times. My grandma she told me, she's almost 80 now. She said she's never seen anything like this. And it's shocking, but we will overcome. And I am just so glad that I'm in a county like this and a part of a school board like this.
Thank you, Cameron. You have anything, Hank?
Yeah, I've got a couple things to add. First, as everybody else has said, thanks for all of this. We kind of had a quick turnaround from going from being in school to being out of school. And so I'm just glad that for the most part, things have gone really smooth and no major hiccups, at least on my end. Just to sort of offer you a student's perspective on all of this, every day my biology teacher, because when we were in school, she'd been covering this whole virus thing. She had been, we've been updating and having discussions in class. And so she decided to make a big Google document for everybody to put their thoughts on daily, right, about this stuff. And as I've been reading it, it gives it a lot of insight into people's thoughts about this whole thing. And I'd say the general consensus among students right now is that a lot of the NTI stuff is good. They don't feel that the workload is too much. They don't feel that they're doing too much, that they have to be spending all their day at school, right, even not in a building. But I think just for high school students right now, there's a lot more concern and a lot more questions and worrying because high school is high stakes right now, especially juniors and seniors, right? There is this thing about, GPAs and, well, I want to make sure that I'm doing good in this class because there's AP classes, there's these college classes and having to manage all that. So I think that just for the board members, anybody else here right now, just make sure that the high school students that you maybe have maybe with your parents are talking to, right, you see on social media, just make sure to remind them that it's going to be okay, right, and the district's planning for this because there's a lot of concern about, like, I don't have a teacher in the room with me right now. I'm not sure I'm getting the best access to information that I can, right? So just make sure that we are trying to ease students' concerns because that's a lot of things. Is that when a kid is worrying, that's all they can focus on, right? So just that part, that's what I would just recommend. But other than that, everything's been great. I really enjoyed seeing all the social media posts from Miss Shelby on Instagram about
Thank you, Hank.
Various posts.
All I have to add is probably what Dr. Nyhoff has already said. I serve on quite a few boards and watching a lot of my emails this morning of what's happening in Washington and also in state government. We were having a tough time getting budgets through before all this happened. Now that all this is piled on us at one time, it's more than anybody was really expecting at any time. But in other words, we're creating a lot of finances, but to streamline it down, like Dr. Nyhoff was talking about, through USDA to where school and prison lunches will get that. I'm sure there's going to be a source of money coming, but it may be some time before we get it. And the other part of it is our commodity jobs here in Shelbyville, our offices are closed, and they don't even have the new software if they have to implement any of those programs to okay a lot of those commodities. So, in other words, after it's all over and said, or whoever approves it, we can't expect it very quick. It's going to probably be the end of this school year before we find out exactly what we really have. The only thing of it is we're doing our job now of getting it done, and we just hope that everybody has good faith when it's over to justify us for what money we put into it. That's all that I have, and we'll move down to E right now, information reports. And anybody got anything that you want to put in on these certified and classified reports or field trips or school finances? You all stop me if you want to discuss any of those.
I'm good, Mr. Phillips.
Is that okay with the rest of you all?
I'm good.
Okay, I seen your hand up, Ms. Rios. I guess all right.
It's
Let's
my
go
butt.
down. Okay, I'm ready to go to board action items. So I'll turn that over to Dr. Neidhoff to bring that up on the budget.
Very good. I'm going to share with you the slides that we're going to use, and I'm going to let the microphone go over to Miss Barkley, and we will move on. So I'm hopeful that you can see my screen. Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah. We can
All
see
right.
it.
All right, let's go. Ms. Barkley, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so the Budget Committee report and recommendations are ready for your consideration. The Budget Committee met 4 times. Their objectives were to recommend initiatives necessary to maintain progress with the strategic plan. That was the overarching objective. And then any initiatives that were necessary to recommend ways to fund them. And also during this process, we examined existing budget items to see if we would recommend any reductions to those. So as a result of the meetings and the discussions, the Budget Committee has 2 initiatives they're recommending to be funded in the recurring budget for next year. The first one has an estimated cost of about $280,000. It is for ARC chairs, and that would be for 4 of those individuals that would be shared among our elementary and middle schools, which would relieve some of the workload off of counselors and principals and assistant principals and other folks who are providing that service right now. The second initiative is an increase in pay grade for certain classified staff, and that's estimated at about $91,000. So the total recommended additions to the recurring budget are $371,000. And as a part of this work, the Budget Committee also is recommending ways to fund those 2 priority initiatives. The first is to revise the staffing formula for certain classified staff, and that would save about $126,000 in the budget. And then the remainder of the funding needed, they are recommending that, at least for now, we reduce the recurring budget for device replacement. Device replacement funds are part of the recurring budget and they accumulate. So we do have a substantial balance available to be used for device replacement next year, even if we reduce the recurring amount. There are still funds available to make needed purchases for next year. The plan would be to try to replace that money back into the tentative budget when we bring it for your consideration at the end of May, through that detailed budget work that we perform each year. As you know, at the draft budget stage, we really don't have a lot of real information, and we haven't dug into the details in order to find any places where we can make reductions, where we can get the budget a little tighter. So through that process, we are hopeful that we would be able to replace those funds. We may have a change in SEEK that would provide additional funding. But nonetheless, at least for now, the recommendation is to use that funding as a way to provide the money needed for those two initiatives. The next steps in the budget process, we will continue to work on that fiscal year 21 budget as information becomes known. Of course, we're anxiously awaiting the result of the budget talks with the legislature to find out what our funding will be. We will bring you a revised staffing allocation in April, which could be the same as preliminary. And then tentative budget will be considered the second May meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the budget committee recommendations.
Mr. Phillips, I have,
Go ahead, Mr. Klein.
sorry, Joanna.
That's fine.
So I've got two questions. One is with if we make a motion and we approve the budget committee recommendations, all we're doing is necessarily accepting their recommendations to consider for you to try to build into the budget.
Yes.
Or are we actually saying, yes, this is what we want?
You're correct. It's approval for me to include those items in the tentative budget that we'll bring to you in May.
Mr. Klein, if I could just make a point of clarification.
Sure.
I probably shouldn't have used the word approval. We typically don't use the word approval. It's You're accepting the budget committee recommendation, not approving it. And so whoever makes the motion needs to use the word to accept it. That allows her to build on it, but obviously full approval of it will be yours to make. For example, she mentioned there could be a change in a staffing allocation. Well, then, you know, staffing allocations come to you May 1. So you would get to understand and analyze all that well ahead of time.
Okay. And then my next question probably isn't for Ms. Barkley. I think I'm going to go towards you, Dr. Nauhoff. It kind of surprises me, and I have to apologize. I should have brought this up prior to the meeting, but it kind of surprises me that the budget committee recommendation has to do with 4 ARC chairs. I don't remember from any of our meetings with the schools that being discussed as a need, as an initiative. Usually the budget committee comes out with something that we kind of expected. I didn't really expect this.
Let me connect the dots. One of the things that we heard heavily from all of the councils was a need for counselors. So school counselors and mental health counselors, that was consistent across the board. So as they studied all of this, they realized one of the big time eaters that exists for elementary counselors is chairing ARCs. And so this is a more affordable way to take that responsibility off their shoulders so they can do more counseling. So we're hopeful that that happens. And then there's also some really good logic here in that if, of course, now with what's happening, you know, with the virus, we don't know, but if the budget does include additional funding for counselors, then we still get that, but we get that with a state funding source. So it's wise in a couple of ways for that reason. It's a really good question.
Okay, thank you. That does help me. Thank you. And I do remember that being a major topic of discussion. So that helps me tie it together. The only thing that I'm going to say, and I don't think the budget committee could do anything about it, but when we have attended KSBA conference, when we've sat through, when we've looked at turnover, et cetera, of our faculty, I still don't think that we have figured out, and not just us, I think in our states, we have not figured out how to fix the salary deficits of our faculty. And I know we can't do that in budgets and stay. I know that it's not something to expect in this presentation. I still hate the fact that we're not addressing retention and raises that we can afford. And I don't really know how to fix it, but guess what? No finance director from the state could ever help us figure it out either. So I'll stop talking.
Well, that's exactly right, though. There was a tremendous amount of discussion about that. Is there a way to do that? And the answer is no, not until more revenue comes from the state level.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Mrs. Friels, were you next?
I just got a question again about the ARC chairs. Now, is this for new teachers or new counselors? Is this addition to the counselors that we have?
These are the ARC chairs for elementary and middle. So we have ARC chairs at the high school already. We don't at the middle school level. So this is to add ARC chairs. And what we're going to do is they're going to share the load. So they won't be just at one school. They'll handle multiple schools.
So that'll be 4 more people, right?
Say that again.
4 more people, 4 more
yes,
counselors.
They're not counselors. They're special education teachers.
And then, okay, this is the next thing. Oh no, I've got the answer to it. I had to rethink it. I'm good.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mrs. Barkley or Mr. Neidhoff?
No, because anything I would think of is really going to depend on when we get to go back to school and how that income is going to, or the revenue is going to affect the balance of the year. So I think that once we get back and see that, there might be some more figures that we need to be doing.
Well, I would agree, Ms. Jackson, and to make your point, one of the questions we weighed was, now that so many things have happened since the budget committee finished their work, is it even a valid thing now to bring you their recommendation? But we want to honor the work of the committee and present their recommendation to you, and and try to follow this tried and true process we've been using for 10 years or so now.
One of the things that we have said that the daycares would be, good wording, I made note, that would be self-supporting. But then with the closure, that's going to affect us too.
Yes, there are issues related to daycare that we're working through.
Yes. Okay.
Does anybody, Sonia, do you have questions? Ms. Blackburn, do you have questions? Is she on?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. All that I would add, I know every committee I was in or meeting that I've been, in other words, we have a big need across the state for our mental health, and how we go tie it in, or state is evidently not got any more money to come down to put with that to aid our counselors in that. But I know, as Ms. Oakley knows better than anybody, that this is a big need that we got to have, and how I'm like Mrs. Jackson, how we go fit it in later down the road when the dust settles on all this situation we're in right now. So do I have a motion that we have reviewed the budget committee's recommendation?
I'll make a motion that we accept the budget committee recommendations for 2020, 2021 budgets.
It's been
I
moved. Go ahead, Miss Joanna.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Klein and second by Mrs. Friels. Is there any other discussion? If not, do I hear a motion to approve it as presented by the commission? All those in
With vote.
favor, say yes.
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 Yes,
Anybody vote no? It carries. It brings us down to item number B, consider approval of payments of claims and authorize the superintendent to sign all necessary documents.
So moved.
I second.
It's been moved by Mr. Klein, second by Mrs. Friels. Any questions?
no,
All those in favor say yes.
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 All those opposed, motion carries. Brings us down to C. Consider approval of the monthly financial report for February 2020.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Klein,
I second.
second by Mrs. Friels. Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, brings us down to D. Consider approval of the board meeting minutes for March 12th and 19th, 2020. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. So
Been
moved.
moved by Mr. Klein,
A second.
second by Ms. Blackburn. Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Brings us down to item number 3, others. Is there any others? Dr.
I'll make
Nyhoff?
a,
We have a recommendation that you consider approval to enter into closed session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters per KRS 61.810 sub 1 sub F.
so moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Klein,
Second,
second by Mrs. Jackson. Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Pose. Motion carries. We're in closed session. Thank you.
See y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 For those of you who are watching the meeting online, we thank you for your attendance. We're going to end the live feed now. And thank you for your interest in the board meeting tonight.